What's up, beautiful people? It's your boy Judeo, and I'm back again with a new video. Today we're going to be checking out a video that I think is going to be interesting. I saw the title and I
assume it's going to be interesting. I'm not even sure.
but it's titled
The Moth, Confessions of a Pro-Social Psychopath, James Fallon.
Sounds interesting, right? Anyways, without wasting your time, let's get to it.
Ladies and gentlemen, James Fallon.
There he is. He looks like Luciano Pavarotti.
I'm a scientist who studies the brain, and I've been a neuroscientist for about 40 years. And most of that 40 years, I've been what's called a small-time scientist. I have a small lab, only a few people, small grants. And most scientists are like this. We're kind of hobbits. And the whole idea of being a hobbit is that you stay within the wheelhouse of your expertise. You don't talk to the media, you don't give talks like this, and you just stay under the radar for everything. And if you mind your own business, everything will be okay. And that's really how I live almost my entire scientific life. Now, generally, I was like a pretty average guy. I was a class clown in high school. I still have my Teamsters card, which I can go back to at any time, hopefully. And the first date I ever had, we were both 12 years old. I'm still dating her 50 years later.
Wow,
So
that's
quite
beautiful.
an average, regular guy, seriously. And so anyway, the kind of science I was doing, which is the basic chemistry, connections of the brain, and also adult stem cells, that was going along just fine. And then I got a call from some colleagues in psychiatry and radiology. And they said, you got to come over here. We got a really cool new machine. And the cool new machine was a PET scanner, positron emission tomography. And the great thing about it,
Positron emission tomography. Those are big words, guys. Tell me what it means. Actually, break it down for me.
this is you're able to
Define.
see inside the human brain, the living human brain, and activate certain areas of the brain depending on what people are doing, the tasks that they're doing. And so, I mean, for a neuroanatomist, this is a candy dispenser. And it was love at first sight. And so I got involved. I made the first mistake of going outside my wheelhouse of expertise. But anyways, we started to do these studies on consciousness and memory, addiction, and also things like schizophrenia. And that was going along fine. And then a couple of years after this started, which was kind of the mid-'90s, I saw a SWAT team come in, and they were all over the medical school. And it was right near where the PET scanner is. And I saw this guy come walking in with manacles with the police. And then I got a call in the afternoon. He said, from another colleague, he says, you got to take a look at this. And they had started studies of serial killers. And the idea was to go in, these are serial killers that have been caught. And during the penalty phase of the trial, only the penalty phase, they want to show that they're crazy, right? And the devil made
The
them do it.
penalty
So
phase.
we could show that they were crazy. It would show up in their scans. So I started analyzing these, maybe one or two a year. And it was just kind of a side thing. And everything was going along just fine. Then about 6 years ago, another colleague showed up with a whole pile of these. They had all these killers' brains, scans of these killers' brains. But it was mixed in with normal people, people with depression and schizophrenia. And the good thing about this is I had no idea which scan belonged to which person or what they were. It was a blind study, and this was a perfect opportunity. And this is really advantageous because it's so difficult with the legal system to get this kind of data. So I went through and spent a few months looking at it, and I started to create piles of different areas of the brain that seemed to be malfunctioning in these different people. About 3/4 of the way through, I noticed something. I said, first of all, I knew what all the normals were, and I knew the schizophrenics because I had seen a lot of those, and depressives. There was a whole other group that had a mix of damage, but they all had one thing in common. They had damage to two parts of the brain. One was the area right above the eyes, orbital cortex, and the front of the temporal lobe. And this really floored me because it made sense because one is kind of the animal instinct control of your brain, amygdala, and the other is where your ethics and morality are thought to be processed. And the fact that these two were off meant that
Orbital cortex, right? That's where morality is processed.
the balance
I'm
was
learning.
off, and it made some sense. So I really thought about this and did a lot of reading and developed a theory. 3 things you need to have a psychopathic killer's brain. And I just started to give talks. It was just very interesting to me. About the same time, funny things started to happen. And the first was we were doing an Alzheimer's disease study in our lab. It was for clinical trials. We're also trying to discover new genes for schizophrenia, for Alzheimer's and schizophrenia, it's turned out. Now, it turns out my wife's family loaded with Alzheimer's disease, and she just lost 2 parents with Alzheimer's. So I said, look, I went to her and I said, why don't we come in as controls, get involved, we'll do PET scans, look for the genes for what we knew for Alzheimer's, and I'll get my brothers to come in, and we'll do the kids. And then, if we can see that, anybody has these, high level of these high-risk genes, maybe they can do something. And they can change the way they live, their diet, and all these things. And she said, absolutely. I mean, she was quite heroic about this. And she figured she was going to die of something else, which she didn't, before she, died of Alzheimer's. So we did this. Everybody was enthusiastic. So the results came back, and so I was going through the pile of my family's PET scans. And as I was going through, I was really very much relieved because everyone was normal. So I went all the way through, there's like 8 of these, and the genetics were normal, and I got to one on the bottom, and I thought it was in the wrong pile because I also had all these killer's brains in another pile on the desk. And I said,
how can you manage all of that?
I mixed them up. And I looked at it, and it looked like the worst case of these psychopathic killer's brains. It had no activity here and here, the 2 areas. And I looked down, and it was me. It was my name. So I kind of thought, I said, I kind of get the joke here because
Joke's on you,
so,
literally.
I really thought for a second, and I'm a scientist. Was like, isn't that interesting? And I just reflected
This
back.
is serious.
I was, growing up in New York, I was Catholic Boy of the Year in New York, which got me to meet Nelson Rockefeller. I don't know why those go together. And I was so hyper-religious my whole life that in college, I went to a Catholic college, that a priest there, who was a professor, said, you're so bad, you got to get out. So he actually gave me an exorcism to get the goody two-shoes out of me. I had no idea how to sin, really. And I learned. It took a while because my heart wasn't in it. So you'd go
I had no idea how to sing, but I learned it took a while. I wish more people were like you.
through these steps. Okay.
Until we see
Now-
your brain scan.
So I kind of laughed it off because I knew that I was in jail. I didn't kill anybody. Then I was at a barbecue. We had a family barbecue. The whole family there and the kids and everything. My mother comes over. she usually does, and she pulls me aside. She says, I hear you've been giving talks about serial killers, and I saw a twinkle in her eye. Because she's really, even if she's in her 90s, it seems to be getting worse. She's very devilish about this. She says, check your father's family out. So. Said your cousin, who's an editor of a paper in New York, found this new book, and it's about your father's family. And he says, and check your scans very carefully. So I went and I got the book and I read it, and I'm going, and it was really wild. It's about the Cornells, that's my father's family. And in it was the case of the first case of matricide, which is the killing of a mother by a son. And that was in 1667. So it was a very interesting book on, how these sorts of murder cases were handled back then. But then at the end of the book, there were 6 more murderers in the same line, going from that family to me. And so we had this whole family, and she loved this because she had to put up the whole life with this thing about being Sicilian, and her father, lived out in the streets here when he came over from Sicily. He was about 12, just a couple of blocks from here, and he became a bootlegger, and she went up to Lucky Luciano's place. So she always gave her the mafia thing, even though she wasn't. This was her chance to get even. So anyway, that was fine. And then within a year, I was invited to give a TED Talk. In a TED Talk, you got to talk about something interesting, important, funny, and all this, which is not that easy. So I got desperate, and this was a mistake. And I told the first part of the story about my PET scans, and everybody's normal in my family but me, and this thing about these Cornells. So I gave that talk, and this was when TED was just starting to put these
Videos out.
talks on YouTube. Somebody called me up and they said, they just put your talk on YouTube, and it's got like 30,000 hits overnight. And I went kind of blank on this because I made the first no-no about being a Hobbit scientist, which is doing something like that. So anyway, I got all these calls, a lot of media things, head writer for the Wall Street Journal Science, came out, spent some time with us. I got a phone call from the executive producer.
The
head
media
writer of
liked
Criminal
this.
Minds, Simon Mirren. He says, I got what you're talking about, man. Transgenerational violence. And he was fantastic, and they both were. It kind of put the pressure on me because I had hanging out there this family history and my PET scans to look further into this. So I looked further into the genetics. And I was trying to look for things generally. So we did a very a broad scan, but having to do with aggression and violence. And all these genetics came back in my family. And I can tell you this because every one of them have an average amount of high and low risk genes for aggression and violence. And so they were all cool. And I looked at the last number, and there it was. And I looked at mine, and in my own DNA, I had all the high-risk alleles for violence and aggression, every one of them. And so these so-called warrior genes, and there's a number of them. The first one is monoamine oxidase, and they control serotonin and some other transmitters. And so it got a little bit more serious. So I started to ask people, because I saw in there things having to do with bonding to people were just not right. You know, the cuddling sort of hormones, oxytocin, vasopressin, and testosterone. And it hinted at something may not be right. That's when I really took notice. So the next mistake I made is I went around asking everybody what they thought of me.
You're going to kill yourself if you do that. You might just hang yourself.
My wife and I have been hanging out, 50 years together.
Hanging out.
What do you really think of me? I said, no, tell me.
Oh, no.
I went down, asked my grandkids, our kids, and people who are really close to my friends. And every one of them, including professionals, psychiatrists who knew me well, said, we've always known you're kind of a sociopath. And I went,
What?
What? I said, and I was in sort of a denial at that point. Every one of them said you don't connect to people, you're kind of cold, and you're kind of superficially glib, and you're great at parties, and you love strangers, and you love world peace and hunger and doing all these things generally. But in terms of being the person really close to you, your mother, your wife, and other people very close, it ain't such a fun ride. It was quite a disappointing person to be around. And at 63, you're not supposed to be finding this stuff out. It's like at 21, so you can fix it.
After 50 years of marriage, you find out, oh, shit.
Going to do it, 63. So there it was. And, the very fact, they all agreed, including the professionals I had known and worked with. They just said, you're an interesting guy to be around, so they kind of tolerate it because I'm fun and interesting generally. But emotionally, I don't have the kind of empathy, apparently. Bonding with people, I bond with strangers, strangers and world things. It's upside. So I live, and there are actually genes that seem to be associated with these different kinds of empathy. Now I heard this, and after I heard all of it, I didn't care. And
symptom number one. You just proved.
I really didn't care.
Symptom number one.
And it was kind of the proof that what they were saying was true. So that's interesting, but I truly, really don't care. Now, it's got me to think about, the nature of good and evil and about free will and other sorts of things that we hold near and dear to our humanity. And I started thinking about psychopaths, because I also happen to score a little too high on the psychopath test. Like that.
A little
That's exactly
too high?
how I felt. I'm not a full psychopath. I'm not a psychopath light. I'm what's called a pro-social or successful psychopath. Sounds so charming.
Yeah, it is,
But
right?
out later, I'm happy to be with you. And I really started to think, there's a very constant number of these in all sorts of societies that maybe society really needs psychopaths. Because, do we really want our surgeons to be really empathetic when they're doing the surgery? Do we want somebody cold and calculated and right on the money, right on the spot of doing good surgery? Do we want our Green Berets
Good points, though.
to really be empathetic where they go, or do we want them to protect us? And do we want our CEOs and do we want our investment people to really be, heartfelt? Or to
Forex traders,
money,
especially.
And when I think of it, and I said, well, maybe we need them. We need this, and sometimes it gets out of hand. But really, it kind of got to me in the sense that everybody feels this way about me who are close to me. People don't know me. They said, "No, that's not true." But people who know said, "Yes, you've got it, man." And so
You've got it.
I figured
It's like
just recently,
HIV.
the past 2 months, maybe if I just acted the part, even though if I don't feel it at an emotional level. So if I treated the people close to me with kind of caring, kind of civil, go to all the funerals and weddings instead of the parties. If I started doing those things, maybe just acting them out would be a good place to start, just to be a good companion and a good friend. And so that's where I am now. Thanks.
That was actually a very good story. He's a very good storyteller. That was a very good video. I told you that one might be interesting, and it turns out it was very interesting. I had a good time. He's a very, very good storyteller, James Fallon. I appreciate that one. You know, sometimes we think psychopaths or the traits of a psychopath is just something abstract. These people are not from the society, or they are aliens that came from space. But if we all check ourselves, we might find the same pattern of these psychopathic traits. You know, we might just find it. Don't be surprised that the same genes or traits that Adolf Hitler has, you also have it in yourself. Even I might have it, you know, but it doesn't mean we are going to be doing like stupid things or being evil or being wicked. It doesn't necessarily mean that. I mean, there are important traits to help with decision making. Imagine you're a soldier and you have to kill somebody, otherwise they'll kill you. At that point, what do? Do you have to sympathize with them or, you know, shoot them? You know, we all have those patterns. We all have those traits, guys. This is not abstract. But anyways, I enjoyed that video. Let me know your thoughts on that one. If you want us to check out some more, feel free to let me know. Send me the title, send me the links, and we'll check it out together. If you're new to the channel, smash that like button, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one. Have a wonderful day. Peace.